Volunteer Coast Guard. Officials now estimate it will cost at least $150,000 to replace the burnt-out building and its contents. But as Shane Mooney reports, there have already been offers of help.
Last night, the local flotilla held their monthly meeting at the club rooms. At 12:15 a.m, the last person left after locking up. An hour later, the timber structure was ablaze from end to end. Nothing at all was saved in the fire. This charge remains here as only one of 4 rescue crafts destroyed in the blaze. Now the group that has helped thousands of people out on the bay in the past now desperately needs help itself.
It's very distressing. All the members are pretty downcast this morning. It's very hard to replace something like this in a short time. We've got to have phone lines in by tonight. We've got to have auxiliary radio equipment set up somewhere to be able to carry on and sort of keep the work going, or the good work going.
Are you confident that your men will get behind you and rebuild this headquarters here?
I've been in this flotilla, or connected with this flotilla for 20 years, and I'm very confident that all the fellas and all the gals that are associated and everyone associated with the organisation are going to be all well and truly in it. Yeah.
Already the Coast Guard has received offers of help from a number of people, including the local council. The Mayor says his council will do all in its powers to help rebuild new premises. A Coast Guard spokesman says until more permanent arrangements are made, the group of volunteers will continue their vital work from their mobile caravan. Shane Mooney, Eyewitness News.
And if you The address to forward any donations is as follows: Post Office Box 270, Elstonwick, postcode 3185.
Which early this morning destroyed the Frankston Coast Guard headquarters. Robin Miller reports the Coast Guard officers estimate it will cost $200,000 to rebuild and replace vital rescue equipment.
The blaze was discovered shortly before 1:15 this morning by a security firm who regularly patrols the premises here on the foreshore at Frankston Beach. 3 local fire units raced to the scene, but by the time they got here, the fire had an almost total hold.
2 hours later, all that was left of the single-story log cabin was a charred shell. Completely destroyed was the kitchen, meeting room and boat storage area, containing 2 5-metre patrol boats, 2 dinghies and other search and rescue equipment. The flames also spread to the Victorian Coast Guard's main communications tower, a 10-metre structure housing vital radio equipment to monitor distress calls from all over the state. The Coast Guard service is purely voluntary. The building was insured for only $40,000, but it's estimated it will cost $200,000 to replace.
Just got no hope of raising it ourselves because our members seem to be orientated to going out and doing the work on the bay, and fundraising, as I suppose with a lot of other organisations, is a bit of a problem.
If you are interested in helping to rebuild a vital link in Victoria's coastal rescue services, donations can be sent to the Australian Volunteer Coast Guard Fire Appeal, Post Office Box 270, Elstonwick. Robin Miller, National 9 News.
The operators of small boats have come under fire more than once after mishaps in Port Phillip Bay. At last week's marine hearing, board members criticised amateur fishermen for their lack of knowledge of seamanship. That ignorance led to last month's grounding of the Australian venture. The board found that small craft forced the vessel to leave its shipping channel. Marine chiefs have asked the state government's boating committee to look into introducing licences for boaters.
No one knows more about the ignorance of small boat operators than the Australian Volunteer Coast Guard. Its members spend most weekends tending to boats in distress. So they're the first to admit there's a need for a licensing system, a system which needn't be a financial slug to boat operators.
It's not the licensing system for the sake of licensing, Trevor. It's the necessity to see that people, before they take a boat out, know the regulations, know the things they have to do to be safe on the water. The water's a very dangerous place, but I would be very reluctant, my association would be very reluctant to advocate a licensing system that just became another taxation form.
The Coast Guard has submitted one plan to the state government. It's similar to the South Australian system, where boat drivers need to pass a test and pay for a licence that won't cost anything to be renewed. Coast Guard chiefs also want the state government to clamp down on boat drivers who drink at the helm. They say many lives have been lost because fishermen haven't been able to cope with an accident while under the influence of alcohol. But while the licence question is debated, the Coast Guard is urging boat operators to be informed of the dangers of the sea. It wants to see as many people as possible at its regular safety courses. Trevor Borman, Eyewitness News.
It was 20 years old today, and Mary Anderson joined the birthday celebrations.
CG-15 Coast Guard, could you proceed to Mornington? Vessel in difficulty, could you assist please, over?
Coast Guard from CG-15.
Yeah, affirmative to that. Yeah, we'll go and join the rest of the fleet. CG-6 out.
The idea of a water safety organisation for Victoria was thought up by Mr. Ted Madden in the early 1960s. His idea was based on the highly successful American Coast Guard service. Today, the association has just under 2,000 regular members. But the work of the Coast Guard doesn't just involve voluntary weekend and public holiday patrols. Since 1961, more than 15,000 people have attended public instruction courses, and the association is confident that these sort of courses have raised the standard of water safety in Victoria.
Primarily, we prefer to offer public education through public instruction courses, and in these 20 years, over 15,700 people in Victoria alone have taken advantage of these courses.
But in 20 years of volunteer service, the Coast Guard has not been without its problems. Last summer, vandals set fire to the Coast Guard's watchtower at Frankston. The fire left the association without one of its most essential pieces of equipment and $60,000 in debt. Finance for the tower and for the rest of the association's activities will come from water safety grants and fundraising. But even with its problems and a busy summer ahead, the Australian Coast Guard has some free 20th birthday advice. And it's based on one common rescue situation which will crop up time and time again this summer.
Stay with the boat. Whatever happens, stay with the boat. Because so many people lost their lives simply because they thought that shore was only a short distance away and proved to be fatal for them.
Now, coming up,
Australian Coast Guard Association. Nearly 40 boats lined the Yarra Bank for the ceremony.
More than 850 Victorians owe thanks to the men and women of the Coast Guard Squadron for rescue and safety operations carried out in the last 12 months. Today, squadron members gathered before the mission to Seaman Padre, perhaps taking out a little insurance for the coming year. The ceremony has been an annual event since the association was formed in 1961. 11 of the 38 boats here are owned by the association. The others are private craft, skippered by people who devote much of their spare time patrolling Western Port and Port Phillip Bays, as well as the Hume Weir at Wodonga. The sail passed after the ceremony provided an impressive bonus for those on the banks who'd gone to the Yarra to catch a little of today's sunshine. Tracy Grimshaw, National 9 News.
Today, conditions then were perfect, but locals say late last night some fog set in and the bay became choppy. Today, 2 police boats, 5 Coast Guard boats and the Peninsula Southern Rescue helicopter were called in for a full-scale search. But by late morning, as the boat was being towed back to shore, there was still no sign of the man and little hope left. Are you fairly sure that he's drowned at this stage?
We believe so.
What's going to happen from now on? Is the search going to continue?
The search will continue until we feel that it is no further any use.
And when will that be?
And until we're quite sure that the body is not going to be washed up on the shore.
The small crowd of onlookers gathered at Frankston Beach watched as the boat with its 40 horsepower outboard motor was pulled out of the water. The boat was then winched onto a trailer and taken away to be photographed by police. Late today, the search for the missing man's body continued. Anne-Marie Sparkman, National 9 News.
Is there any sign of the man?
There's no sign of the man at this stage.
The missing man's brother was comforted by friends after he had seen the boat. He told me his brother was married with 1 child. I understand there's a hole about the size of a hand underneath, and the keel has been split for quite some distance. An extensive search and rescue operation was launched, but under difficulties. Before the weather calmed down at midnight, the middle of the bay had seen waves of 1.5 metres, winds of up to 40 knots, and the upturned boat almost certainly drifted a considerable distance. It may be that the boat collided with an underwater object. If it was not marine life, fears are held that it may have collided with another boat, which sank from sight.
Victoria's 2 women were rushed unconscious to Frankston Hospital when their boat burst into flames after colliding with another vessel. They are in a satisfactory condition, but emergency services still fear for the safety of a man who's been missing on the bay for 24 hours. His boat capsized and several hours of searching have failed to find him. Lee Elliott has more.
The fisherman was first reported missing last night. The 26-year-old man from Somerville had been fishing just off the Frankston Pier and was expected home by 4 o'clock yesterday. When he failed to return, the Frankston police were called in. The 16-foot runabout was finally found early this morning, capsized and with a large hole in the hull. The cause of the damage is unknown, but police do say conditions were rough last night.
However, there was a fair bit of wind prior to midnight last night, and I think that would have whipped the seas up a bit.
However, there was still no sign of the missing man. By now, he'd not been sighted for over 24 hours. Police decided to intensify the search, and conditions were perfect. With clear, glassy waters, the task was made easier, but they still could find no trace of the man. But the discovery of a pair of thongs bearing the initials of the missing man aroused suspicions as to his whereabouts and finally led to the Frankston police abandoning the search. Lee Elliott, Eyewitness News.
Grant Kenny back in action and a big winner in the latest Ironman contest.
But first, the Port Phillip Bay boat race tragedy. 1 man is dead and 2 others are badly shaken tonight after their powerboat capsized during a race off Sandringham. Race organisers say the boat flipped after hitting a freak wave, trapping the dead man underneath. The drama unfolded shortly before midday as a fleet of powerboats surged south down the bay. The twin-engine powered death boat was in the middle of the fleet when it surged off the top of a swell and nose-dived into the bay, splintering in two. One of the other race competitors immediately sent off a mayday call. It was 11:52, and within a couple of minutes, 2 Coast Guard boats were on the scene. And what was initially thought were the only 2 occupants were pulled aboard. Shocked and shaken, they revealed there was a 3rd crew member, but they were unable to find him.
As soon as I got under there, I could see the legs dangling, and I tried to pull him out, but he was stuck.
He was stuck in, what's still in the seat of the...
Underneath the boat. The boat was upside down.
The dead man and the 2 survivors were taken ashore while Coast Guard officials tried to salvage the wrecked boat. The bow section was towed ashore, and what was left told dramatically of the ferocity of impact. Out on the bay, divers were sent in to try and prevent the stern section from sinking. As they made repeated dives, an oil and petrol slick moved out across the bay, a silent testimony to the earlier tragedy. The divers have had to call off their salvage attempt for 2 reasons. Firstly, there's a change coming across the bay, and secondly, fuel leaking from the 2 engines that's causing irritation to their skin. The death was the first involving powerboat racing during the long history of the sport in Victoria. Well, earlier today, fears for the safety of 2 men missing on the bay also sparked a big rescue operation. Luckily, a helicopter soon spotted the 2 men who had spent the night on the bay after their boat's engine broke down. Jennifer Kite has the details.
John Gaffney and Andrew Bassett, both 31 years of age, were towed into Frankston this morning by the police launch. They'd gone fishing at 5 o'clock last night, and when they hadn't returned by 10 o'clock, the alarm was raised. The police air wing began searching for the boat this morning, along with 3 police boats. It's a 5.5-metre fiberglass open motorboat. It was later spotted by the Southern Peninsula Rescue Squad helicopter.
And we took our time and did everything right, set off flares and did all the right things, but eventually in trying to start the motor a number of times, the battery got too flat, so we saved the battery to use lights. And we used lights, but we didn't realise the land looks very close. This side looked very close, but as it turns out, we were miles from anywhere. We were nearly on the other side.
The bay can be quite deceiving, as a lot of boaters know many through similar experiences. The men were glad to be back, as were their families.
It was a long night, wasn't it, eh?
Jennifer. Despite frantic efforts to save him.
The O'Meara has claimed the life of a 29-year-old man in Port Phillip Bay. Rexall reports the man drowned after getting into difficulties while diving with friends off Mount Martha.
Police have taken possession of a set of compressed air tanks following the death today of 29-year-old skin diver Christopher Knight of Pearcedale. Mr Knight and 2 friends were skin diving off Mount Martha when his tanks apparently ran out of air during a 20-metre dive. According to rescue workers, Mr Knight became tangled in his basket line before he could reach the surface and drowned before he could be pulled to safety. Andrew Varga and several other members of the Australian Volunteer Coast Guard were on the scene within minutes, but all efforts to revive Mr Knight met with failure.
The diver was brought to the surface, he wasn't breathing. 2 other divers were trying to resuscitate him on board the boat. We responded with 2 Coast Guard vessels and divers went out to him, tried to resuscitate him on the spot, and while we were bringing him back to shore, arranged for an ambulance to meet him at shore, and they tried the oxygen, but he was gone at the time when he came to the surface.
29 of Pearcedale on the Mornington Peninsula.
Christopher Knight and 2 friends had been diving for scallops at a popular spot just off Mount Martha this morning. And despite near-perfect diving conditions, a call for help went out at 10:30. Australian Coast Guard volunteers, who were at nearby Safety Beach, took only 8 minutes to answer the call. But even with such prompt action, they were too late. One of the first on the scene was diver Andrew Varga.
As you can see, the sea conditions were perfect, but the conditions on the boat, the other 2 divers that were on board had actually pulled the diver aboard. They were trying to resuscitate him when we got there. John Dosley, one of the other divers, and myself took over with the resuscitation and cardiac compression, but he was at the stage where we weren't getting any pulse or reaction.
It's believed the diver realised he was running low on air. In his efforts to get back to the surface, he got caught up in his carry bag, snaring him 2 metres down. In his struggles to get free, he used up the last of the supplies in his tanks.
In North Wales,
Why don't I push the button and we'll have a look at what happens if you are in the... Oh, my nose is getting worse.
You don't like sand, and you don't like water, and you don't like the coast, and you don't like ships.
The Australian Volunteer Coast Guard is a community service group whose main aim is to promote water safety on or near the water.
For Saturday, this forecast will be transmitted on Channel 6/7 directly.
The functions of the Coast Guard volunteers are quite varied, but probably one of the most important functions is radio control.
We have an overturned catamaran,
2 miles due west of Frankston Pier. Would you proceed and assist to right it? Over.
Coast Guard Melbourne, this is CG1, Romeo, we're on our way, out. Inside the upturned yacht now, the occupants appear okay. We'll endeavour to ride it and tow it into... Coast Guard Melbourne, this is CG1. We have the yacht in tow to Frankston. For information, it is a monohull, not a catamaran, as first reported. Over.
Romeo, CG1, Coast Guard out.
The main reason boating accidents happen is because of ignorance, carelessness, unseaworthy boats, and the lack of equipment inside boats. The volunteer Coast Guards want to make people aware of this, and by doing so, to ensure that people have a pleasurable, fun and safe time on the water.